All right, welcome. This is next year is going to be our 50th anniversary for Mobile Fidelity. Really the oldest audiophile record label that has ever existed.
Yep.
And we wanted to take this time to kind of go through what our Mobile Fidelity process is like, what it is to the effort and that goes into making a Mobile Fidelity record. I've heard it said before that people go, how can a copy be better than original? And really, the way to think about it is that all vinyl is actually a copy of the source, but all copies are not created equal. And the reason that we feel we make better copies are because of the process that we go through with each and every recording. And I'd like to turn this over to Rob Laverty, who is one of our senior mastering engineers, and to kind of go through how we do things and why it matters.
Yes.
Take it away, Rob.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you everybody for being here. Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab has been around since 1977, and it's really pioneered the concept of bringing the best sounding versions of your favorite albums to you. It came at a time when the record industry was really booming. We could probably thank the Beatles for that, where all of a sudden, instead of having to produce a very small quantity of records, they had to produce millions of records immediately. So things got really slim in terms of the quality. All of a sudden, you had a lot of regrind, and you had a lot of records that just really weren't made very well. Ironically, it happened when the music was amazing. And all of a sudden, the product on which you received those great albums really wasn't giving you the full story of what was available in master tapes. So Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab starts by acquiring the original master recording, which is of course why the stripe exists on each and every product. The master tape the importance of the master tape cannot be overstated. It is where the information first gets recorded by a recording and mixing engineer. There is no replacement for that. There are the instances where master tapes no longer exist, in which cases you have to find the greatest safety copy of that tape. But Mobile Fidelity began by endeavoring to get the original master tape. We will either bring that master tape to Sebastopol, California, where our master lab is, or in some cases where the artist refuses to send their tapes anywhere but the Smithsonian, or they just want them in their possession. We will not take no for a direct answer, or we won't take a copy. We will actually pack up all of our equipment and go to where these tapes reside and do our direct transfer to the backup. Okay? So that's the sort of the story of original master recording. You must use the original source as it is the best. We continue by using the very best equipment on which to transfer the tapes, because it's one of the things in the audiophile advertising world is to say, we use the original master tapes. Now that's great, very important, as I've just said. However, you can have a grape, but does that mean you're going to make grape wine? No, you have to know how to make wine. You have to use the right equipment to do that. You have to have the best conditions. Every step matters. You're only as good as your weakest link, right? So where that comes in is most tapes in the world, most original master tapes in the world on recorded analog. Digital has been largely used, but not entirely used for about the last 20 years or so. But analog tape rules, and it always has. So the most important thing to do is to capture all the information from the master tape. The late, great Tim DeParavicini is the giant on whose shoulders we still stand. Back in 1998, Tim DeParavicini was hired and contracted by Mobile Fidelity to create the world's greatest tape machine. And he did, and we use it to this day because it's still the best. His whole intent was to pull all of the information from any master tape that was played on his machine. The frequency response that we want to get, depending on whose side you're on, interesting/boring, is frequency response that put as low as 5 hertz and as high as 40 kilohertz, beyond human hearing on either side of that bandwidth, he could capture that at a flat frequency response of plus or minus half a dB. There's no other tape machine in the world that can do this, and we get to use that on every single project. We transfer every master tape to the DSD format. Is anybody here familiar with DSD, otherwise known as direct screen digital? Great. That is the highest sampling frequency that exists, especially when you go as high as 4x DSD. 4x DSD has a sampling frequency rate of 11.2 megahertz. That is beyond the bandwidth of analog tape itself. Analog tape itself really can't go beyond, and this is being generous, 384 kilohertz. So it's like saying you have a bucket that can hold 100,000 tons for something that's going to be about 2,000 pounds. So there are no limitations with DSD. And with regard to making a copy, I think it's important to say that when you make a copy, what that means to me is that you're doing something, you're making a copy of something to a format that's going to introduce its own artifacts, its own anomalies. If you make a copy of an analog tape onto another analog tape, you're going to get tape hits. If you make an analog copy onto a record, you're going to get surface noise. The reason why direct screen digital is so valuable is because you're making a copy onto something that introduces no inherent artifacts. It is a mirror image of what you fed into it, which is why it is so valuable to us. You're making a clone of the original master tape. And the value of that is that when we encounter the situations where we must go to where the tape is and cannot cut the record with the tape in the room, we have a clone of that tape. And that tape can be played endless times. Whereas, do you want to play Fleetwood Mac's debut album 50 times to cut a one step? No, because every time you play it, it degrades, even if microscopic. So the equipment that we play back everything on is paramount in making the quality product that we make. Also, fortunately, we have a very small team of mastering engineers who have decades of experience doing this. As myself, I've been in the music industry now for 26 years. We also have Craig Wunderlich, who cuts most of our records, and he's been with Mobile Fidelity on and off, but he started with the company in 1986. The guy's been around for a while, right? And so things continue to this day with techniques that were introduced and pioneered by Mobile Fidelity in 1977 called Stan Ricker. Does anyone remember that name? I'm sure you do, Joe. Stan Ricker was MoFi's first mastering engineer, and when I first started with the company in 2007, it was sort of, like you guys, sitting for a master class and learning, the Godfather's techniques and master tricks.
Too late. Yeah.
In tape transfer, there are certain parameters which must be acknowledged and adhered to. Just having the master tape is not enough. You have to play it back correctly. You have to consider things like the tones and how you calibrate your reproducing amplifier that's capturing the information off the playback head. You have to consider, is your tape machine running at the right speed? You have to check that for each and every transfer. You have to check to see if the azimuth, does anybody here understand azimuth? It's probably the most important part of magnetic tape recording transfers. So what you have is when a recording engineer is making his recording, there is a bias signal that is imprinted on the magnetic tape by the record head. And that record head is calibrated to some standard. It's kind of arbitrary. It's wherever that engineer set his record head to. But when you're doing our work and you're trying to retrieve all of the information from the recorder, you have to match your azimuth to that record head. Is that making sense to everybody? Right? So I have to basically mirror the characteristics of the machine that made the recording in the first place. And without doing that, I don't hear a whole lot of, commentary on things like azimuth in the audiophile world. It just seems to be, well, if you have the master tape, it's going to be great. Well, not if you don't play it back right, right? So Basically, our whole system revolves around audio retrieval from the best possible source. And then, Jim, is there anything that you can think of that I'm not touching upon?
Polarity.
Right, and it starts with azimuth. It starts with azimuth because that is a completely objective parameter. Your azimuth is either correct or incorrect. There's other things that we consider, things like polarity, absolute polarity. Does anybody here understand polarity? So take, for example, an album that I did not long ago by Joni Mitchell called Courtney Spark. Everybody knows Courtney Spark? Okay, so even if you buy the original LP from 1974, there is no uniformity to the polarity characteristics from the original session, which means, in my world, what do you think I should give priority to, instrumentally speaking, on a Joni Mitchell record? Should I give the priority to the drums?
That's something.
The acoustic guitar? Maybe. The bass guitar? No, I should give it to Joni. And when you play back this album, interestingly enough, it was done by the great Henry Louis at A&M Studios, the polarity of Joni's voice changes with each and every song. You put on the first song, Courtney Spark, her voice is in negative polarity. Put on Help Me, the following song, it's positive polarity. Making sure that everybody understands what this means. If I'm speaking to you, in what direction is the air coming out of my mouth? It's coming in this direction, right? And hit your ear in this direction. Imagine if I spoke and air was being pulled in. Or in other words, if it was coming out of the speaker, instead of the speaker being pushed toward you, it was being sucked away from you. That'll change the characteristic of my voice. Nobody seemed to be paying attention to that when they made the Courtney Spark album. The great thing is that I'm able to play back that tape and prioritize Joni's voice so that now when you play our LP or our SXCD, her vocal has uniformity across the board to have that same positive polarity, tonal characteristic. It's a game of inches, but these are meaningful inches.
Definitely.
So, we're really excited about what this means for all titles going forward. We have some very interesting titles still, coming your way. We're about to put out the great Van Halen 1984. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that one. We also have Stone Temple Pilots. We've already released the Tiny Music album, and there's still more to come with that band. Some interesting anecdotal information about that would be some of the challenges that we face with some of the sources. It's not always cut and dried and straightforward, where you get, 2 master tapes and this is the album. Sometimes, in some cases, you get 24 reels of tape, and you have to determine which mixes are the correct mixes. That was something that we had to do with number 4. I'm curious at this point if anybody has any questions about anything I've conveyed or questions that live in your mind about mobile fidelity. Yes?
When we're mastering, Fisher calls the faith of the master the sound and master papers probably the sound as good as possible. I've heard at least that sometimes master things like can sound pretty dull in the light as
Yeah.
the mastering is hydrogen necessary to get was do it.
I'd say the answer is, I don't know if everybody can hear this, gentleman. It's a great question. What is sort of the goal in the mastering process? Is it to most faithfully capture the sound of the master tape, or is it to make it sound as good as possible? The hope is that both of those things happen at the same time. With the tape transfer process, it's an objective process. It's either right or it's wrong. The taste of the mastering engineer, we're more documentary than drama. I'll put it that way. It's more about being faithful to the master in the original release than to the artist's intent than me saying, I think they should have more bass because I think it sounds good. You might not. You might have a completely different system than I have, so it'll sound quite different. But I will say that the native sound of the master is the primary consideration. Beyond that, we always make sure we get an original LP, sort of like getting an original film print that would have been shown in theaters. You could say, all right, this is how this was supposed to look in whatever film it might be. Same thing with the master. It's like you get that first pressing to say, okay, this is what was approved at the point of creation. So both of those things are considered. I would say in most cases, the original master sounds way better than the original pressing. Yes, Joe.
We were talking about azimuth adjustment.
Yeah.
I have a typical set master tape. So how many azimuth adjustments being relayed? Is that something you just make an adjustment on average and let it go?
Right,
How is that possible?
that is a great question. Thank you, Joe. So
What was the question?
the question was, with regards to azimuth set, is it a set it and forget, or are there adjustments throughout the program? And the answer, once again, is both, because there are some records, for instance, Supertramp Breakfast in America. You all know that one, right? The azimuth from one song to another through all of the edits, from the start of side A to the end of side B, is perfectly consistent azimuth. And we can thank the great Peter Henderson for that, who co-produced, recorded, and mixed the whole album. He just made it easy for us mastering engineers. An upcoming title that I'm very excited about, television's Marquee Moon. You guys are fans? Cool. So that tape came from Atlantic Studios, recorded and mixed by Andy Johns, brother of Lynn Johns. And I guess azimuth was not a big consideration for him, because
I'm saying this.
every song had a different setting, completely. And you really had to watch. Some of the tools that we have that I may not have mentioned at this point would be the oscilloscope. Everybody familiar with an oscilloscope? That's going to tell you, I call it the heart monitor of the musical spectrum. It's where you look to see what's really going on. I mean, I would cut a record without VU meters, but I would never cut one without an oscilloscope, because that's telling you about level and phase and polarity, all there on one screen. Each and every song on Marquee Moon was from subtly different to monstrously different, and all of those adjustments get made to maximize the output of the tape machine in terms of correct tonal calibration and everything that gets considered in the transfer of a master tape. So thank you, Joe. Yeah.
Hey, Rob, can you talk about why copy tapes need the DSP?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
That's another good point. Thank you, Jim. So it's very important. I'm going to go on record here and say that I would never cut a record directly from an analog copy. Because with a copy tape, you are at the mercy of the person that made the copy. Imagine a scenario. So what do you need when you're making a copy of an analog tape? You need two tape machines. You need something that's going to play back your tape, and then you need another machine that's going to record the copy. So I have the azimuth setting of the original playback, whatever I'm about to record, and then I have the azimuth of the recorder making the copy. Everybody with me? So I get that copy tape 30 years later, and I want to adjust azimuth to match the recorder, right? Not the original master tape, but the tape that made the recording. So on a good day, those two calibrations match. Most of the time they don't. But when I play back the copy tape, I'm correcting the azimuth for that copy tape, but it is only later that I can actually correct the azimuth and the phase for the machine from the machine that was doing the playback, right? So I can't possibly get phase and azimuth correct on a copy tape at the same time, because if the playback of the original tape was out of azimuth, I cannot correct for that and the copy tape at the same time. So once I capture the copy tape, I can then go in my workstation and correct the timing between the two channels that is inherent in capturing a copy tape. So that's very important when transferring a copy tape. A master tape is not really so much of a consideration. but with a copy, it's paramount for sure. Yeah.
Did you know multiple mass?
Multiple masters? There really isn't. There's really, I mean, unless they did something, for instance, the album Fleetwood Mac Rumors, they actually made 2 master tapes, you know, by running two-track machines off of the main console. So they would mix to one machine and mix to another. But that's very rare. So usually one master, you know, one thing that can actually truly be classified as a master. Yes.
Well, there's Sour Girl. You get that
Oh,
example.
well, that's multiple versions. Yeah, that's a
Right,
great
but
point.
they're all masters,
They're all masters.
but one is the right one.
Yeah, it's important to distinguish what constitutes a master. So, in our world, anything that is mixed from the multi-track in modern recording in the stereo world, if it's mixed from the multi-track down to 2-track, that is a master, and it may not be the master version of an album. With the Stone Temple Pilots album number 4, does anybody know the song Sour Girl? Happens to be Stone Temple Pilots' biggest song. In the 24 reels that exist to make that album, there's actually 6 different mixes of the song Sour Girl. So you have to sit there with the original release and say, okay, that's not the right mix, that's not the right mix, that's not the right, oh, here it is, you know. So that's part of the sort of archaeological expedition in doing this mastering. Yes, sir.
You see, you have Rush up there, people that he loves that. And you did their whole band, that's my favorite thing.
Oh, it's a great question. We're really excited about Rush. We've actually just gotten underway with production on that band. And so it's not going to be every album. I think it's going to be about a total of 9 or 10, Jim, if I'm not mistaken.
I think we're doing almost everything on the Mercury catalog, which goes up to Grace Under Pressure.
Grace Under Pressure.
I think the only thing that we're not doing is the live album.
Exit Stage Left?
Exit Stage Left.
Right, okay. Right, so that would encompass the first album, you know, Fly By Night. I don't know that we're doing Caress of Steel, but I think we're doing everything else but the live album,
Right.
Up until and including Grace Under Pressure.
And we're
It's about
doing
9 or 10 albums.
We're doing a combination of 1-steps, 2 LP45s, and SACDs.
Right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So play that to play that from the plane. Like, but I thought at one time there was a controversy as a part of letting out black dinosaurs, so the guys and clothing, whatever, that I think her process also figure good with the crop. They could fit it on last. I think we think it analog is good methods. And then that wasn't much about all of this.
But so you're specifically talking about the analog to digital transfer and then the cutting of the record. Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of the advantages of that. But that's okay.
Can you explain to them if you're cutting directly from the analog master to the lacquer, these azimuth adjustments just can't be made as precise?
And the polarity adjustments.
Yeah.
So direct to, you know, from the master tape to the lathe was the way to do it forever because there was no alternative to that. But one thing that's been proven over the years is it's more advantageous to do an analog to digital transfer first, and of course you're trying to find the best digital format to transfer to, and we've achieved that. The advantage is there are so many adjustments to be made in the process of cutting a record stop. It's not just, you know, you put the tape on, you in play, you start the lathe, and there's a side. There are many considerations like we've been talking about, like azimuth and polarity, things that change at intervals like splices and the intervals, the gaps between songs. Those adjustments can be made on a song-by-song basis when you transfer from the master to digital. When you cut a live record side, you might miss an azimuth adjustment you could miss it by a full second, you could miss it by 10 seconds. Polarity adjustments have to happen on the fly, and when you're making those important adjustments, you can introduce a pop into the audio because it's an electrical event. These are things that don't exist once you transfer that tape to digital, avoiding all of that. and then you can more precisely cut a representation, pure representation of the master tape. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, should be done.
Well, that's okay. No, that's no problem. Anybody else have any? Okay, yeah.
If I was to decide what is inside that, I want to go. I, of course, still were like, is that the late or is that more on like the house and house architect?
I would say most of the time that's determined in the contract by the label, the owners of the recording. It's no secret that there's the advantage too of 45 RPM because the data is spread over a longer space. If we could, we would do. See, a lot of people have different feelings about it. People don't like hitting up to flip records open and things like that. But if we're going for the ultimate in audio, it should be a 45 RPM. But the contract and the owners of the music, the labels,
I don't want you to.
those are factors. Yeah, they don't want competing products in the marketplace, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It looked quite definitely to have one step. You created on Andrew North.
Yes. Oh, yeah, sure. So that is where our pressing plant, Fidelity Record Pressing in Oxnard, California, comes into play. So our flagship release, they're all original mass recording products, but we introduced the UltraDisc One Step as a way of having sort of a marquee, sort of series for the Hotel California in 1984 and like that. The process is the difference between a 3-step process and a 1-step process in terms of making the records. Is anybody familiar with the process of making what's called a standard 3-step record? No? So we begin by cutting a lacquer. And a lacquer, of course, is a positive that you can play with a stylus like a typical record. That record is then electroplated and creates a negative of the lacquer called father. That father is then electroplated to make a mother, and then we continue on to make a stamper, and from that stamper the pressings are made. And this is all because as we electroplate, the element gets stronger and can make more records. So you cut the record once on your lathe, and then from those lacquers you can make many stampers and press many records. But with the 1-step process, it's sort of the opposite. You cut many lacquers, and then from each lacquer that gets electroplated to make a mother, and then, right, you immediately go to making a stamper directly off of the lacquer. And from that stamper, we make pressings, right? So you'll cut it 10 times to make 10 stampers to make however many pressings. 5,000 is usually about what we do these days for a 1-step. It's sort of varied.
It varies depending on the title.
Yeah.
But generally, you can get about 1,000 records out of each stamper on average.
Right.
And I think one myth that there is about stampers is that people think that the grooves wear out over time as you press, but that's not the case. So the grooves don't wear out, especially over 1,000 pressings.
Right.
What actually wears out is the outer rim and the inner rim of the stamper, and they crack. And once they crack, you have to throw them away and get a new set.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it is a largely held myth that has proliferated, and people think, it's metal. I mean, it takes a lot for it to wear out, so that's true. Thanks for mentioning that point, Chandler. So that's one of the advantages about the 1-step process is that because you're going directly from the lacquer to immediately making a stamper and then making your pressing, you're removing 2 steps that all introduce anomalies like noise and issues like that. Sometimes things get warped. You want the flattest profile of a record, you want the integrity of the grooves to be maintained. All of these things are eliminated by taking out 2 of the 3 steps in the process. So
That is sound we're going to.
what's that? Sorry?
I'll be completely equipped to a better sound, or that's getting it.
Absolutely. A better sound because of a more accurate, transparent sound. Yeah. Yeah, yes, please.
By 7 CDs, that money of your catalog,
Were there any you were especially proud of in terms of the recording quality?
Oh yeah, definitely. What?
Yep, Allison.
You just led me into like my favorite story, actually. That's a good question. Thank you. So, I get most excited. I'm primarily an SACD mastering engineer, so I get most excited about records that have been released more recently than, say, 20, 30 years ago. We already have really good versions of some of these records, but in the case of something like Stone Temple Pilots, which was put together and mastered in a time where it was all about make it loud, and then super compress it and make it very commercial, like a product. Where we come in is that we try to not EQ and we never ever compress. And that's one of the biggest parts of modern mastering is super compressing it. Well, when our version of Stone Temple Pilots comes out, I encourage you to get the original CD and then the LP. It's not going to be a one-step. The LP and the SACD. Because the difference in the presentation is gargantuan. I always thought that this album was a poorly engineered, bad-sounding album. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It was just killed in mastering. They smashed it, and it doesn't breathe, there's no emotional connection to it, it's just all out all the time. So I'm particularly proud for being able to bring to the consumer and to the listener a version of the album that should have existed in the first place. Instead of, making a record for, it's got to sound good on the radio. Yeah.
Or the Michael Jackson was good. She had off the wheel at 35, the wheel at 23. Virtually the same font of bids. But
So there's two versions of the Thriller one step. There was the 33 and the 45. Yep, sorry?
well, dude,
Yes, so I think he was under the impression that we only made a 33 RPM version of Thriller.
That's true.
You didn't do a 45 on Thriller?
No, it's in the planning, or it will be done later.
Oh, there you go. Do you want to take this one? Because you would know how to do that more than I do.
I mean, when it comes to the Michael Jackson catalog, of which we're very proud of what we've done so far, and Bad will be coming out in July. But there are, we follow what the estate wants to do, and so all of our timing of these releases is dictated by the Michael Jackson estate.
the people.
Yes.
What involved with using the artist, and the original production, the line but which artists have been the most hands-on it comes to getting involved in?
It's a good question. Who was raising their hand over here? I want to make sure I get to them. Sorry, these two guys are next. So that varies completely. It depends completely on. Usually, it's a contractual thing. For instance, Supertramp had it in their contract that Peter Henderson must oversee all of their mastering, and that was very interesting because that was about a year of going back and forth with him before he was pleased, and so are we. Because we want the compromise. If somebody comes and says, well, I now want you to compress this, it's like, we don't do that, But there are definitely artists, management, producers that could be in the process. Most of the time, that's a unique situation. Most of the time, we get to do what we feel is the. Yes.
So I thought these big problems on you getting recordings.
How much? I'm sorry. One more
How
time.
much of a problem is phase for the recordings?
Phase.
Phase, yeah.
Yeah.
The phase of Joni Mitchell, you said.
Right. I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's just something to consider
It's an
when
issue.
calibrating. Yeah, that's most of the job. Most of the job is capturing the audio, the information off the tape. One thing that few people know is that back in the day, when Ampex and Studer and these manufacturers of tape machines were making their machines and their amplifiers to go with it, is that they invested all this money in making the record electronics. They really wanted to make great recordings. Unfortunately, they didn't invest in nearly as much in the playback. So you had this vault full of recordings made on these masterful tape machines, but no real ability to pull the information back off of it. And that's That was taught to me by Tim DeParapicini, and that's what the whole goal of his playback electronics was to match the quality of the recorders. So we've got a leg up with that. So yeah, yes.
So I know you guys use DSD for pretty like you said, for the getting the information off the tape.
Yeah.
I bought Love Over Gold, your version of that. It said DXD on the back. I've never heard of that, so I figured I'd ask you.
Does it say DXD on the back of that?
That was the flangent process
That's right.
record.
I've never seen that.
I didn't realize we put that. I thought the artwork was done before we got involved. So DXD is, gosh, what is it's digital extreme definition.
They bought that.
No, it's a situation where we had to introduce a process because there was some damage on the master tape that affected speed. So WoW and Flutter, the plangent process does not operate in direct straight digital, so it had to be a digital conversion to DXD, which is where plangent operates at its greatest resolution. So we had to introduce that step to correct for some anomalies in the speed. So that's why, yeah. That's one of my favorites too. That's such a great title. Yeah. Who else can I talk to? Any other questions?
Any plans for reel-to-reel?
No, not at this time. No, that's the, it's a great thought, but like, how many people actually have reel-to-reel players? Anybody? Anyone? Two?
Thanks.
3, 4, 5. Was that?
It's not.
So that's the thing that Mobile Fidelity's always done is we've taken popular formats and optimized the product around that. If you look at 1977 when we started, you get the LP record, most of people are buying that. You get to the late 70s, early 80s, wow, cassettes really taking off. So we perfected that format. And then when the CD came around, yes. When the CD came around, let's make the best aluminum CD, and then, well, that's not good enough. Let's make the best gold CD, and then Super Audio CD.
Part of the problem with reel-to-reel is that, you're not going to sell more than 500 maybe.
Yeah.
And the record labels don't really want to deal with anyone coming in that's only getting 500 units.
Exactly, yeah. Good question, though. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Do you have any plans to make digital files downloadables for service?
That's another tricky business because, again, it is a business and a lot of the major labels see that market as theirs. And you kind of have to buy into that, and there's a lot involved with that. And again, we don't get a lot of people asking for that, so we must consider the mass of the audience. I would love to see downloads, but it's just not economically viable. Yeah. But it's a great format because you get to use some really great servers that'll play back this stuff without a disk, without moving parts. I like that too. I'm told we have about maybe 4 minutes left, so if anybody's got any questions or thoughts, we've got a gentleman right here again. Okay. Hello back there.
Hello, thank you.
Yes.
I kind of want to piggyback on the question over here. How often are artists involved in the remastering process with you guys? I'm just kind of curious. And then how much input they get? I know you said contractually be kind of based on what is agreed upon.
Yes.
And then do you ever get artists who come in and want to actually remaster the old album and actually change a lot, say, we'd actually do this the right way? And I want to say one thing, your guys' Alan Parsons' project, iRobot release, is just impeccable. I just barely picked that up, and
sure.
just another level.
Did you get the double LP, the one step, or the SACD?
I got the one step.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Great title.
Yeah.
So this gentleman did cover that question a moment ago, but I will answer it again. And again, that's always contractually decided. There are certain artists that have it in their contract that no reissues without their direct sonic input, sometimes the artwork too. So we don't really seek that out. We find that all the information we need is either on the master tape itself or the original LP it was released on. But there are times where they must be involved. And luckily when they do, they're not really in a revisionist mood. We keep our fingers crossed that that doesn't happen because they may want to re-sing it. You never know. So.
Actually, I sometimes working artists.
Yeah. Like here?
Is too late.
So sometimes,
Oh, actually, come over here, not near the speaker.
when the artist is involved, you know, when you plan your production schedule, you say, okay, I'm going to give the artist literally 2 weeks to review the test pressings. What if they're touring? What if they're ill? What if, so now your production schedule is blown out. That happened with 1984, a little bit of delay for 1984 due to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Bridget. Yeah. And actually, I'd like to say really quickly, I don't know if you guys know, but the great Don Landy, who recorded all those great Van Halen albums and the Doobie Brothers, passed away last weekend at the age of 79. So I'd like to say I'm really glad that he lived, we're blessed that he lived long enough to personally approve all of our Van Halen releases. And I'm extra proud to say that he made no changes. What we presented was accepted and approved by the man that made the tapes. So. And how are we doing on time? Anybody? 2 minutes? Okay. Anyone? Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, we got a mic coming your way. Hang on.
It'll make it easy.
Okay.
These master tapes, they don't degrade over. Well, it's just,
Well, that depends on storage and usage. You know, you can burn it, right? I mean, you do anything you want to it. Luckily, these libraries like Universal and Sony and Rhino, which is to say Warner Brothers, have impeccable storage facilities that keep things in temperature and humidity controlled environments. We try to play these tapes as little as possible, so that's a help too. It's all about handling, you know, sort of care and feeding, if you will, you know.
You could talk about tape shedding, though.
Oh, there is that though. There is one of the phenomenons, I'm sure a lot of people here know about it, is sticky shed syndrome, where I'll make this fast because I know our time is running out. Basically, the adhesive on the tape creeps up through the magnetic particles and you can't play it without baking it. So you bake the tape and then you get your transfers and then it goes back in the vault and so you need it again. So that's one of the things with tape that's like a worst case scenario.
I just wanted to ask one really short question. Have there ever been any releases where the master tape is really, really hard to track down?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Definitely. But we've been so very fortunate. I can't really think, well, the ones that are the MoFi stripe, it was either a situation where we couldn't confirm that it was the master, or it really wasn't, it was the best surviving copy. And I do think that wraps us up, unfortunately. I could talk for another 3 hours with you guys. You guys have been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.